All right, here we are. Another episode of the Be Your Will podcast. I mean, again, great pleasure. Running into these artists. I mean, I reached out to Ben Lee. I threw an email over to him, and wow, he said yes. So here I have Ben Lee coming in from Sydney. Is that correct, Ben?
That is true. I am here.
Very cool. Well, Ben, I I don't want to do what I normally do with you because I like to go and talk about your beginnings and all that. I want to ask you, what was it like? You started Noise Addict at quite a young age in your early teens. What was the first song that came out of that band?
Well, the band was sort of just this construct. I was being very resourceful and utilizing, that friend of mine, his older brother has a drum kit. So this guy has access to drums. He's the drummer. So it wasn't really like a band that music came out of. It was like I'd write songs and I'd bring it. I'd be like, okay, play this, play that,
Okay.
But I mean,
Do you
the
remember that
first,
first song though that you guys played together?
yeah.
Like once you assembled
Yeah, I mean, it would have been
together?
something from that first Def EP that Thurston Moore put out, or like Dead Kennedys, Let's Lynch the Landlord, or
Okay.
Holidays in the Sun, Sex Pistols. We did that. But yeah, there was like a handful of songs I'd written, like Listen to Your Girlfriend and Summer Trip and Filthy, and those first ones. I sort of, it's funny when I remember years later when Rivers Cuomo was at Harvard and I heard he'd done that Excel spreadsheet breaking down every Nirvana and Beatles song.
Yep.
I really related to it because that's sort of how I started writing songs where I analyzed, I was like, okay, so it goes verse, chorus, solo, sometimes a bridge, double chorus, end. And it was like understanding the basic formula for a pop song was kind of how I did it. I went, okay, I need chords for a verse, chords for a chorus. So you can have more minor in the verses and more major in the choruses. Like I just sort of learned the basic science of it. And that's what all those early songs were. And in a way, it hasn't changed. Yeah.
Right. And that formula that you cracked into, did that serve, did it ever change at all? Like, I know that in later albums, you started to kind of maybe get a little bit more experimental or like dabbling in different genres, but did you pretty well maintain that structure throughout most of your songwriting that you've done so far?
I would say that anytime I veer away from a traditional pop song or folk song format, I'm doing it kind of consciously. It's like in Hearts of Darkness when Coppola says to Dennis Hopper, you got to learn your lines before you can forget them. So it's a bit like that. Like that, even when I'm not doing that format, I'm aware that I've strayed from that format. So it's a conscious choice, But I like jammy bits and noisy bits, and I've also always I have that indie rock thing of I love a good 30-second song
Yeah.
that is it's almost like from hardcore or something.
Right.
So, but in general, the framework of a pop song seems to work for me.
Right. And that first record that you did solo wise, Grandpaw Would, I mean, I got addicted to that record big time. And it's kind of like you just said, these little short pop gems. How did all those songs kind of assemble that first record of yours that you put out and came to Chicago to record?
Yeah.
Did you have all of that in your baggage when you came over to the US?
Yeah. I came and I recorded 12, I think, or 14, because I thought that was like what a number you're meant to have on, but no one actually timed the songs and realized that they were all like 2 minutes each. So at that point, because it was pre-streaming, what constituted an LP, like a full length, it had to be over 30 minutes. And I think I came in at like 28 minutes or something like that. So Grand Royal were pretty annoyed that they brought me over there and everything. So then they sent Casey Rice to Sydney to record a few more. But yeah, I used to write a song pretty much every day, like after school. Just come home, write a song. I just picked the best ones.
Right. And like, what was your writing process back then when you're just, you had your formula, you're figuring it out? Like, what was your process like? You'd come home from school and what would come first? Like, would a lyric hit you or would it be a couple of chords put together? Like, how did you start creating songs for that first record?
I mean, I think when it's best, it's neither strictly one or the other because even words have rhythm to them. So even if you come up with a phrase, there's a built-in musicality to that phrase, to the way the words sound that suggest music, you know. Um, but a lot of imitation. I've always been sort of like a kind of a big believer in imitation because you can't sound like anyone else, especially when you're starting, because you don't have the technical skills to imitate well. So you end up doing these sort of very weird versions of. So I think I was just thinking a lot about Tom Morgan from Smudge, this songwriter I loved, and Jonathan Richman and Pavement and Sebadoh, and just sort of like writing my versions of those songs and trying to, get girls I had crushes on to notice me or whatever.
Right. And like, what was your first like chords that you learned that ended up coming through in your songs? Like.
Oh, I mean, pretty much from when I learned my first three chords, like E, A, and D, I wrote songs. I mean, you only need me and my daughter. She's going to get up and do a song with me on the weekend at my show, and she wanted to cover a Big Thief song. Oh, cool. And it's a G and C chords. Right. The whole song just goes back and forward, and she's like blown away. Like you can see that moment when you realize that it's not as complicated as you feared. That's like the experience I had seeing Nirvana play when I was like, this is like three guys just that are friends. And obviously the songwriting's incredible and they were great musicians, but the actual architecture of it was not complicated. Right. And it's a very liberating kind of thing.
Yeah. I read also, Ben, that you, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but you were on The Voice in Australia. Were you a judge?
I was like a mentor, they called it. So it was like you had the judge, like in my case it was Joel Madden from Good Charlotte, and then I was his like guest. It was just like another way to sort of shoehorn some celebs into it or something.
Right. I think. Right. And like what is it? Like when you see an artist and listen to them perform, like what hits you first about, wow, like there's something there.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know that I'm a particularly good A&R person in that sense of going like, do they have it or not? Because like I remember a tour with like, there was like Lemonheads headlining Me in the Middle, Matchbox 20 on first. And I just didn't, I thought Matchbox 20, I liked that song Push. I thought that was pretty good, but I thought this is like a major label thing that's not going to work essentially. So I'm just sort of not that good at going, this is going to 100% have commercial appeal. I think I know my taste very well. So yeah, like it's interesting now that Ione and I have our company Weirder together and we sort of use it as a platform to share work that we like because it's giving me more of a chance to just sort of realize that just because things are good doesn't mean they're like for me. So like sometimes like I'll come across things, I'll be like, that's really good, but it doesn't fit with what the vision I have of what I want to share. So what kind of lights me up in terms of an artist is I really like, I kind of just really like a mixture of courage and vulnerability. I like anything that I like things that have a DIY, some level of DIY-ness to them. Like I don't want to feel the hands of 40-year-old men on a record by a 20-year-old. You know what I mean? I just don't want to feel that. Yeah. I want to feel that I'm like inside the artistic experience of a young person. So I would rather it feel clumsy and sloppy and messy, but authentic in that way. So that's sort of it's just but it's hard to say. It's like sometimes you hear something and you're just like, oh my God, this is like my vibe. This is what I want to play in my car while I'm driving around.
Right. And when you first started performing, like, did you have that courage as you talked about just now? Like when you went up on stage and started delivering your music to people, or did it have to come, like, did it take a while to gather that courage to do, to keep pushing it forward?
It's a bit hard to say because when you start out, you have a lot of bravado And courage, real courage, usually comes through experience. You know, you get to know yourself.
Right. Right.
So I think I put on a pretty good show of like, but then in a way, you think about it like in a war, does a soldier actually have to be brave or do they have to act brave?
Mm.
Um, you know, you can still be pretty effective just by faking it.
Yeah.
But then later, as the pressures build and different opportunities come up, if you don't have genuine courage or self belief, it becomes a little harder
Yeah.
to meet the challenges.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I would say overall, I had guts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I heard too. I don't know if it was an interview or a podcast, but your drive, like it was there from the start. Like you knew
Yeah.
what you wanted to do. I think you referenced like the door opened slightly and you were like, you jammed your foot in it. You're like,
Yeah.
it's not closing. Like
Yeah.
this is what I need to do. And my question is, I guess, Ben, is where did that come to you? At such a young age to want to put yourself out there to the world and write songs and travel and like how did you come to that as an individual?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. That I always loved music. I always loved performing. I liked singing. I liked storytelling. I liked entertaining. Uh, and then it's like it's like my needs and cultures, like the moment that culture was in with like indie rock, like post Nirvana, indie rock and lo-fi music and home recorded music got like this giant boost because suddenly people were interested in more left of center artists and you didn't have to be perfect. You didn't have to be really slick.
Mm.
So it's just like who I was and what the world was, where it was like, it was like the right moment. It could easily, had this been 100 years earlier, having attitude would not have been enough to start a music career. So I feel very lucky in that sense. You know, it's timing.
Right. And your dad helped you with that first gig with Noise Addict. Is that like?
My dad was like really helpful in general. Like he took us to when we opened for Fugazi. He drove the van down. He was loving and he liked my passion and my enthusiasm.
Right.
So yeah, he was.
How did you communicate that passion to your dad? Like, how did he see that passion in you that music was it? Like, I got to help Ben, you know, get out there.
Well, mainly just because
form or whatever.
No, it was mainly just because I was doing it. Like he saw me, like I was going to the post office and mailing demos and trying to book gigs, and you know, it was also like the era of the landline. So he heard I was following up and doing it. And he was like, I think I can get you a gig at this Waverley Library books, secondhand book sale and sausage sizzle. And I was like, amazing. I mean, that was like a very sweet gesture. You know?
And did you expect that there would be somebody there that was kind of like scoping things out? And like, was that a complete surprise? Like, cause then after that you'd hooked on with Sonic Youth to go and open for them.
Yeah. Well, that was all through the same guy, this guy, Steve Pab, who had been given my tape because I'd sent it into Waterfront Records and he was about to start a co-venture with another guy, Steven, at Waterfront. So and he brought bands out and everything. So I think I'd sent it to them, and obviously what you do is you tell them where you'll be playing next, and we had a gig, and they sent him. So no, it was a surprise because literally it was all seventh graders. It was just our friends sitting in a row, and then this one dude in his 20s, like this hipster dude.
Right. Yeah, artists have been telling me that because I ask, like, when did you know that something was happening, in your career? And they always say, well, I didn't have to invite people to the show anymore. They would just come, but before that, it was all, I had to like get my friends and convince them to come down to the show and fill up a bit of space. And that was oftentimes one of their first kind of, wow, I didn't invite any of these people and they're all here listening, like ready to listen. What was another a tipping point, Ben, so that one obviously propelled, what were some other moments in your career that change the trajectory of perhaps where you were going or
I
what
mean,
saw yourself going?
it's hard for me to identify because it was just one to another to another to
Okay.
another. But
Okay.
like, um, I mean, I can think of lots of kind of creative ones,
Mm,
like hearing Jonathan Richman and realizing that, sorry, realizing that you could play acoustic guitar and it could sort of be punk.
mm,
That was like really big for me. Um, yeah, things like when the Beastie Boys, when they had Grand Royal starting and they wanted to put out my music. When Liz Phair's record came out, Exiling Guyville, that's what led me to doing Grandpa Would with Brad Wood.
mm,
So, and then just tons of these kind of things. Like another one was sort of like when I was about 19, I'd finished high school and I thought I was going to make Breathing Tornadoes in basically my school holidays and then go to uni.
mm.
And it just didn't come together because I was trying to do something a bit more ambitious and it was just getting delayed, you know how things do.
Yep.
And I remember I called my mom. I was feeling like really bad because they'd been so supportive and I was going to go to university. And I just said, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get the record done in time. The label wants me to do it, you know, in April, not in December or whatever. And my mum said, university will always be there. Just follow the opportunities. And it was like one of the most generous things that my parents ever did for me was just give me permission, like to help absolve me of any guilt
Right.
in following my dreams. So those were, yeah, that was a big one.
Awesome. So Ben, a new record just, you know, you just dropped a new record. And you kind of went back to the old school a little bit in the sense of recording and keeping it very like kind of, you know, back to its roots or your roots as an artist. How did those songs come together, and were those songs that just all happened in one shot, or had those been kind of you grabbed them from various times throughout your career, and then so yeah, like how did that record come to be?
Well, I wrote them over the course of a year or 18 months or something. But what I generally find is I start writing and like themes and cohesive ties start becoming apparent. And I think it's so funny. Like the further we get from the 90s, like you start seeing new generations of kids who have infatuations with it. You know, like all those kids doing that fit check thing on TikTok to the Pavement song. It's just like, it's amazing. Like it's amazing watching Pavement become the establishment in a way, you know. But I think it's given, I spent a lot of my time, my 20s, like running from indie rock in a lot of ways because I felt like it was really, it was just sort of like siloed, like what you could and couldn't do. And I think because the generation before me, like the Pavements and Sebados and Sonic Youth, like they came through hardcore. So their like sense of like what was right and wrong about art was very strict, you know, whereas I, in a way, have more in common with like the streaming generation who just saw it all as kind of fodder for my own curiosity and creativity. So I was curious about things that now, like, there's no selling out anymore anyway, and there is no like niches and subcultures, like they all just merge and everything. But like when I had Mandy Moore sing on Ripe, that was just sort of like, people were looking at me like, what? Isn't this an indie rock record? Like, so I spent a lot of time like running from having like too strict a definition of what was okay and what wasn't. And now that more time has passed, the good that I got through coming up through indie rock in the early 90s, like it's just so crystal clear to me. And the parts of that I want to carry with me every day. And that's not all of it, you know, and that's why like on the record in Less Control, I say, you know, I still love the old heads because they've still got soul, but when they get stuck in the past, it leaves me cold. Because like I really do appreciate what bonds me to that generation, but I also want to keep pushing forward. So it just sort of this is what I was interested in, and that's what I was writing about.
And how is the juggernaut of the music industry, like with this release that you've put out? Like, I mean, you've flowed through so many decades of, you know, creating an album, releasing it, touring, singles. has it changed over time, do you think? Like kind of with your eye on the record that you've just put out?
Yeah, I mean, the industry has changed immensely. I mean, I guess because I'm sort of like a good student, like ultimately, like in my personality makeup, that when Noise Addict made our first demos, I found like an industry advice instructions in the back of like our Village Voice type thing in Sydney, and it told you what to do with your demo and how to get it to labels and what you should put in the and I just followed the instructions. And I've always felt like that's no different to like learning how to do TikTok or learning how the streaming algorithm works. Like I've always been open to going, okay, what are the rules of the game? And if I want to get my work across, I got to learn how they work and I've got to do them to some extent. So that core principle hasn't really changed. I'm still looking at the landscape going, how can I engage with this in a way that allows me to reach out, but also preserves the inherent nature of whatever it is that I've made or who I am.
So cool. And kind of like you've had a bit of distance from the record that you've just put out. How do you feel about it? How do you look at it, and now that you have this artifact that you created?
I feel good because I'm also like, now that I've been doing so many shows and I've got this great band together, and I'm doing lots of solo shows too, but also band shows. And I'm just realizing like the architecture of like a live indie rock band, like guitar, bass, drums, keyboard. Hopefully 2 guitars at some point if we can get the budgets up a little bit, but basically like all this other stuff that like tracks and visuals, like they're all great and they're fine and everyone uses them, but I want to do this. I just want to have like a great touring indie rock band with great harmonies and great guitar sounds and the simplicity of that. Yeah. And I think a lot of what I was exploring by having that amazing rhythm section on that album was getting back to songs that can stand up with just that more just basic, aesthetic or that sort of structure. I'm now in a vibe for doing some home recording. One of the things I'm interested in is that when radio was the dominant means of sharing music, it was actually very gentrifying to production and to song structure, because it all had to sort of sound the same. Like I always remember that idea, don't touch your dial. The goal of radio programming is just to give you this ongoing experience that you leave on in the background, right? Whereas with streaming, I think like the algorithm works best if it encourages people to hit like on a song that comes up in the algorithm. So where radio said, don't touch that dial, I think streaming wants you to touch that dial, and they want you to explore and go, ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. So in a way, things that jump out have a better chance than they did 20 years ago, where it felt like things that fitted in.
Right.
So I'm actually feeling quite brave with like production choices and subject matter and stuff, because I think the things that separate you now are actually more of a competitive advantage.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's such a great album. I've been enjoying it. It has that heart and like that punch to it. And there's still some subtle like delicate songs, but like I really loved watching kind of you do I think it was Pop Queen with your guys that you recorded with, just to kind of relive. And it really like it like wow, like it brought back all that flood of feeling from Grandpaw Would, which
it's so weird that like I'm like married to these songs. Now I realize like whenever I write a song, whenever I write an album, release an album, probably 2 songs or 3 songs from it are going to become part of this body of work that I will continue to play. You never can tell exactly which ones they are, the ones that have staying power. But I do realize that it's this mix between having a light touch, but also realizing you're building this body of work. Absolutely. And they're going to stick around. They're going to chase you.
They will, which is amazing, right? Because it's you have this archive now of, and I mean, it's on a record, on a tape, on a CD, whatever. I mean, It just
Yeah.
lives, well, it lives in my heart. I'll tell you that.
Thank
really,
you.
really cool. So Ben, just to kind of, as we kind of wrap things up here, what is the rest of this year look like and into beyond with your music? Are you,
Well,
I
there's
mean,
lots
you're
of
still recording, I
yeah.
imagine, and ideas popping out and songs being written every
Yeah.
day and stuff.
I've got lots of single, like I have a single actually coming out at the end of this week, just a song I recorded with my friend, this solo artist, Johanna Samuels in LA.
Oh, nice.
We wrote a song called Sunset Marquee, so we're putting that out this weekend. I've developed this kids animated musical TV show that I'm going to Taiwan to the Asian Animation Summit to pitch in November. We're still building our podcasts. We're developing a lot. We're gearing up for next year. My wife's memoir coming out, so lots of things around that. And yeah, I'm going to start making a record at some point. I'm just sort of letting the creativity bubble up. Like it usually hits a point where like I can't not pick up my guitar and write a song, and I'm just like, I can feel that on its way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you again, Ben, for carving a little window of your time. I mean, I love the creativity that you're talking about and that you're dabbling in multiple areas. Like creativity has no silos.
Totally.
It must be free. And you're a beautiful model of that creative
Thanks,
freedom.
mate.
So
cheers.
I really appreciate your time, and good luck with what's to come, and we'll definitely be following. And I hope as the next record comes out, you might want to come back on and we'll continue this conversation.
Let's do it.
Thanks so much.
Cause I'ma never know why. I guess a lower could cry. Gets so quiet and I don't even tell my friends. So yeah, I've been kinda down, but when I get into town, maybe you could come round, let's make it good again. Don't you wanna make it good again, baby? I'm half asleep, half awake, I got a heart that can break. A vibe I wanna create, but I've been feeling so strange. Can't stop reading the signs, but if I run out of time with all this love on my mind, maybe I'm ready to change. Oh yeah, I'm ready to change, baby. I really, really wanna be positive energy, but living in reality is getting kinda heavy. I can see it right there in front of me. Give me a hit of your positive energy. Your positive energy. Everywhere that I turn, I'm finding something to learn. I'm finding something to burn. I learn to suffer in style. Guess there ain't no way out of all the sadness around. Just keep my feet on the ground and do it all with a smile. Yeah, we could do it all with a smile, baby. Darling, don't you wanna be positive energy, but living in reality, you know it ain't easy. Can't you see us loving all our enemies? Take a hit of my positive energy. I really, really wanna be positive energy, but living in reality is getting kinda heavy. I can see it right there in front of me. Give me a hit of your positive energy. Your positive energy. Cause I'ma never know why. Guess a lower could cry. Guess I'ma never know why. Guess a lower could cry. Guess I'ma never know why. Guess a lower could cry. I get so quiet and I don't even tell my friends. I really, really wanna be positive energy, but living in reality is something that we wanna be. I can see it right there in